Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is a Comprehensivist Wednesday that we do in association with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. And it's wonderful to have CJ back. And CJ is going to be talking about change and evolution. So CJ, floor is yours.
Yes. Welcome to Comprehensivist Wednesdays, our ongoing series of weekly events designed to foster the art of comprehensivity, our capability to integrate all our sources of learning so as to better comprehend the world and how it works. I think the idea of comprehensivity is best captured by a quote from Buckminster Fuller: wanting to understand all and put everything together. There are many ways to approach the development of our comprehensivity, our ways of understanding the world and its peoples through broad and extensive considerations that are also deep and intensive, with the aim of forming a more and more complete and integrated comprehension of our worlds. Tonight I'm employing a new approach to fostering our comprehensivity, curating a small sample of ideas in the hopes of stimulating a broader, more comprehensive appreciation of the nature of change, evolution, and design. I think this approach is particularly apt for important topics like change and evolution, where I am not yet able to provide an overarching survey or synthesis of the many traditions with their many complex systems of thinking on the subject. I would suggest that this curatorial approach empowers the aspiring comprehensivist to make an initial exploration of a subject before we are able to integrate a large sweep of our traditions into a comprehensive comprehension. That's an ideal nugget of comprehensivist wisdom. Hopefully this approach will work well for all of you. Our agenda is we're going to have a presentation part 1. I'll be presenting 3 exhibits on change and evolution. Then there'll be a breakout room to discuss in small groups the ideas from the first 3 exhibits. We'll come back, and in part 2, I'll present 2 more exhibits on change and evolution, followed by another breakout to discuss those 2 exhibits in small groups. And then we'll come back as a full group for a participant commentary on change and evolution, where you will share your closing thoughts and considerations, your takeaways, and any questions that you have on the subject. And then Shrikant and I will end with some closing remarks on change and evolution. I have a little bonus at the very end. I'm going to give a reflection on this curatorial approach to comprehensivity. So, for the first part, let's consider 3 exhibits on change and evolution. As we consider our comprehensivity, our interest to broadly and deeply understand our worlds and its peoples, we may wonder, what is the world like? How does it change and evolve? 2 answers to these questions come from the great Greek philosophers Hērákleitos and Parmenídēs, who argued, respectively, that all there is change, and that change is impossible. As we look more broadly to our great traditions, we discover that there are many, many ways to think about change and evolution. Tonight, I will curate some provocative exemplars to indicate ways in which our comprehensivity may expand our perspective on change. I have highlighted each example as an exhibit. It is your task to integrate these ideas and illusions into a meaningful reflection on change and evolution. Exhibit A, the every when of the dreaming. To stretch our minds historically and culturally, let's first consider humanity's longest surviving culture, the Aborigines of Australia, with their 50,000-year history. W.E.H. Stanner and other anthropologists have managed to rescue from the devastation of colonialism and genocide some traces and hints of their great culture and its philosophy called the dreaming. Here is Stanner's introduction to the idea, quoting from his 1953 essay, The Dreaming. A central meaning of the dreaming is that of a sacred, heroic time long ago when man and nature came to be as they are. But neither time nor history, as we understand them, is involved in this meaning. I have never been able to discover any Aboriginal word for time as an abstract concept, and the sense of history is wholly alien here. The dreaming conjures up the notion of a sacred, heroic time of the indefinitely remote past, but such a time is also, in a sense, still part of the present. One cannot fix the dreaming in time. It was and is every when. If I'm correct in saying so, it is much more complex philosophically than we have so far realized. That's W.E.H. Stanner from his 1953 essay, The Dreaming. I do not know enough about the dreaming to assess its understanding of change and evolution, but it seems clear to me that any culture with a philosophy that features past and present fused into an every when provides important context for us to appreciate the range of possible ways to conceptualize change and evolution. To understand change and evolution broadly, comprehensively, must we also understand the various cultural approaches to time as well? Okay, Exhibit B. Exhibit B is living in the moment with the Pidahan. John Colapinto's fascinating New Yorker profile of Dan Everett's research on the Pidahan suggests that these are people who live adeptly in the Amazon in a culture of living in the moment. They do not care about anything beyond the most recent past. Everett is a linguist who learned their language to convert them to Christianity. In the process, they converted him to atheism. When he attempted to explain the importance of Christ's life to them, they were very interested until he explained that no, he had never in fact actually met Jesus because Jesus died a long time ago. From that moment on, they had absolutely no interest in discussing the life and teaching of someone not of this moment. If the eternal now is the only thing that matters, why should we care about someone who died 2,000 years ago, even if they are our Savior? What can we learn from a people who actually live in the moment? What can we learn from them about the nature of change and evolution? How might change and evolution manifest to such a people? Could they even conceive the idea? If not, how might that advantage them to not be able to conceive of change and evolution? Perhaps they are our superiors for not being bound to the tyranny of history and change. Exhibit C. Exhibit C is Genesis. It's a quote, Genesis is ongoing. The first paragraph on page 1 of this book, Harold G. Nelson and Eric Stolterman's 2012 book, The Design Way, is provocative. The first sentence is Genesis is ongoing, and the paragraph continues. Genesis is ongoing. As human beings, we continuously create things that help reshape the reality and essence of the world as we know it. When we create new things, technologies, organizations, processes, environments, ways of thinking, or systems, we engage in design to come up with an idea of what we think would be an ideal addition to the world and to give real existence, form, structure, and shape to that idea is at the core of design as a human activity. That's from The Design Way. Is Genesis ongoing? Is creation ongoing? Are human beings a big part of the ongoing creation in our world? Should we think of ourselves in the eternal now as actors in the creative process of ongoing Genesis? Is that how you think of yourself? Should you think of yourself in this way? In general, Genesis means coming into being. Genesis is also, of course, the title of the first book in the Hebrew and Christian Bible. But maybe the beginning highlighted in the Bible has distorted our understanding of reality. In the beginning, that's the way the Bible begins. It might not be the change that matters most. In the beginning is also a storytelling device. It is described by the great Roman poet Horace as ab ovo. That's Latin for from the egg, which he uses to denigrate in his Ars Poetica, written about 20 years before the Common Era. He uses ab ovo, from the egg, to indicate an inferior way to start an epic. Instead, Horace recommends starting an epic in medias res, into the middle of things. That's the approach used in Homer's Odyssey and Iliad. It's the approach used in Virgil's Aeneid and in Dante's great comedy, which some of us are reading to celebrate his septicentennial. Perhaps our great poets and the Design Way have it correct. In medias res, into the middle of things, might be the right way to think of reality. Does that suggest that Genesis is ongoing? As Martin Heidegger saw it, we are thrown into a world already in progress. Life is presented to newborns and to each of us every day in medias res, into the middle of things. in medias res is the nature of the reality that we are thrown into at birth and again each and every day. Hērákleitos and Parmenídēs may have gotten it wrong. The spectator's view of observing whether change exists or not may not be so important. It may not be the right perspective. Instead, the crucial thing might be how we are creating our ongoing reality right now and into the future. It seems to me we should add Genesis is ongoing to our ready collection of multiple working hypotheses. Should we reimagine ourselves as creators and designers of our ongoing Genesis? How might we begin to think of ourselves in this profoundly reorienting way? For the breakout, we're ready for the breakout, Shrikant. I've introduced 3 exemplars: the every when of Aboriginal dreaming, the Pidahan, who live in the moment, and the idea that Genesis is ongoing. In your breakouts, I invite everyone to go around and share your thoughts for a minute or two about these 3 exemplars and what, if anything, they mean to you about thinking about change and evolution. Okay, Shrikant.
All right.
I have 2 more exhibits on change and evolution. So let's continue our investigation into change and evolution by considering these 2 more exhibits. First, we'll examine a few ideas from a major contributor to evolutionary theory in the late 20th century. Exhibit D, Richard Lewinton's evolutionary thinking. In 3 penetrating lectures, Richard Lewinton explains subtleties in evolutionary thinking to help us critique many of the just so stories that we often hear touted as evolutionary truth. Lewinton carefully distinguishes what he calls a variational theory of evolution, like biological evolution, from what he calls a transformational theory of evolution. He explains the 3 principles of variational evolution. This is Darwin's great contribution. First, there are differences in the traits of individuals. This is the principle of variability. Second, these differences in the traits of individuals tend to be passed on to future generations. This is the principle of heritability. And thirdly, the rates of reproduction differ among the traits. This is the principle of selection. Any system where mortal, finite-lived individuals are subject to these 3 principles will evolve by natural selection, just like all the biological life. In order to emphasize that there are many types of evolution, Lewinton explains the transformational theory of evolution, where each individual transforms along a prescribed path. He gives the examples of stellar evolution, a theory well developed by Immanuel Kant and others long before Darwin. And he gives the example of the graying of a population of classmates from school. Both the stars and the individuals in a cohort from youth will change in predictable ways that are not Darwinian. You'll get grayer and pouchier, and stars go through their cycles of growth and decay in very predictable ways. But there's no heritability and no selection. That's a transformational evolution, much different from the variational evolution. Then in his third lecture, Lewinton examines cultural evolution and finds that it fails to meet the criteria for either variational or transformational models. So cultural evolution, he claims, is different from either of the models of evolution that we're most familiar with, and we need a new model for cultural evolution that he doesn't provide. Does Lewinton's taxonomy of kinds of evolution help us realize that there are, in fact, many kinds of evolution, and that we therefore need to be judicious in applying the right model to the right situation? Okay, for Exhibit E, I'm going to share my screen, so I got to maximize this window and click the share screen, and let's see if this works. Okay, it works. Now I need to orient myself. Okay, Exhibit E, a 4-tier hierarchy of change. This model also comes from the book, The Design Way, by Harold G. Nelson and Eric Stolterman. They present a very interesting hierarchy of change that I have adapted in my drawing. There are many interesting and provocative inferences one can draw from this image. We start in the center of the image. The core and central notion of change comes from difference, which evokes the idea of a distinction. As distinctions change, they form a process. A change in difference is therefore a process. Evolutionary change is a higher order change, namely of changes in processes. That's why it envelops the inner circle. But even evolution is parochial change. The highest order, most significant changes come not from elementary distinctions, not from differences, not from processes, not from evolution, but from design. Is design the most overarching form of change that there is? We're now ready for breakout 2, where you will be considering exhibits D and E, Richard Lewinton's Kinds of Evolutionary Thinking and Evolutionary Change, and this 4-tier hierarchy of change.
We're going to do takeaways plus questions. So you can either talk about just your takeaways. You can just talk about just your takeaways, or just questions, or both. CJ, you had a comment.
Yeah, and also more broadly, I mean, the purpose of these exhibits is to think about change and evolution. Do you have, how do you think about change and evolution in the context of these 5 exhibits? You can share that, or if you have a particular takeaway or question, I got my pencil. I'm ready to take down some questions.
Okay. Are you, CJ, do you want to answer the questions as they're asked, or would you like to answer all the questions at once at the end?
In general, I'd rather wait to the end, but if something seems pressing, I can rise to the occasion if necessary.
All right, folks. So it's time for takeaways and questions. We have 4 rules as usual. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom, actually using the app, not just like that because I may not notice it. Second, keep on topic. Third, be brief. 4, speak your mind. Feel free to disagree with anybody on anything and do so courteously. So it's going to be Ray, Kevin, Joe, Laura, and Hiro. Ray, go ahead.
I was just going to continue my observation and question when I was thinking about change making a difference. The question that arose for me was, if you're not noticing the differences, how do you recognize the patterns that make a process, and then also how many processes make an evolution?
Very nice. Thank you, Ray. So CJ, you're keeping track of everything, right?
Yeah,
okay.
I could jump in on that one. I think it's a lot of interpretation. I think interpretation, I think one of the ways in which Genesis is ongoing is the way we interpret the world. And you need to try a number of interpretations to decide, you know, which one you like best. And then think about, is the way I'm changing the world by using this interpretation the change I want to make in the world, or should I adopt this other interpretation, not because it's truer or more right, but because it helps me create the change I want in the world?
Wonderful. Next up is Kevin, Joe, and Laura. Kevin.
Yeah, my question is there devolution over there play a role? Let's see, we are design revolution not efficient or not perfect. There's something we're missing when we during the change of revolution. We miss something. So, and it's key. Then here people follow it because of passive revolution. We just cannot get back. So, thank you.
Okay. Next up is Joe, Laura, and Hiro. Joe.
So we had a couple of good breakout rooms and with a lot of different discussions and points. So I'm just going to hit on a couple of them that I think were, particularly interesting. Is the importance of storytelling when it comes to measuring change and understanding change is really critical, because it kind of has our past and it gives us a difference between now and the future, or between what has happened in the past and what is currently going on and how we're planning in the future. And one thing about storytelling is that had come up was it's how it could be, in a way, distorted and self-serving to, suit our needs. So it has a distinct way of driving certain change. That was one thing. But the more interesting question, as and I'm still going back and forth, is we've talked about it in the past, is the distinction between, and Sandy and both Sanjay had brought this up, is the idea of intentional change versus random change, and how one is evolutionary and one is design related. And the opening paragraph of the book, where the design way, where you have technologies, organizational processes, environments, and ways of thinking or systems, and how those are changes. The question that I kept coming up with is, what is driving the change? Are the systems or the processes or the organization and environments or the technology driving the change, or are we driving the change, meaning as humans? And some of the questions that had come up in the past with the Center for Digital Life was that specific topic. They said that technology is actually driving human evolution and change versus the other way around. And that's something that I've thought about a great deal. And I would just like to get anybody's thoughts on that.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Laura, Jairo, and Mike. Laura.
Okay, we spent a lot of time on the diagram, and we wanted to see if it applied to looking at the different evolutionary topics. And we felt that it did, and that it was very powerful, in fact, how it could incorporate everything, and that there wasn't a limitation on the number of process, that you could have different processes within, it wasn't like you had one example of processes or one example. And anyway, so I think we came to the conclusion that it worked for cultural and it worked for evolutionary change and the other models. And that we also thought about what happens when you get to the design. Does that come back to, could that go back to the change of differences? Could be the change in the designs, and that you go through continue to go through this iteration. And, and that's the process that really drives the change in evolution, is going through this iteration of change through this model repeatedly.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate that. Next up is Jairo, Mike, and Sanjay. Jairo. Jairo, you need to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yes. So let's say that I start off with a system or some kind of already defined or designed before any going through this process. It was designed by one person and put in the center, in the core, and you start out with change is difference, and then change of difference is process, and then change of process evolution, and change of evolution is a design. So that would create a new design. And I'm thinking, how do we assure that after going through that one iteration, it's made an improvement in the original design? So for example, so you have a perfect language, say that's handed down by the gods to a group of humans, and it starts in the center of those circles, and so it goes through a change as being, there's a difference there, and then a change in the difference into a process, and then into evolution in the design. So couldn't that language be downgraded, or what is it called? Degenerate?
Thank you. Thank you, Jairo.
You understand what I'm trying to ask? Thank you.
I think I'm sure CJ got that. Next up is Mike, followed by Sanjay. Mike, I'll give you 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. You gave some of these other people 4 minutes, but that's all right.
You do amazingly better. Half the time you say things twice more profound.
Okay, my clock starts right now, though.
Go for it.
Not this okay. While we can say that process, evolution, and design are major drivers, what you see depends on your point of view. I would say that population variability is the most important driver, and it is biased by serendipity. It is biased by environmental hazards, and those cause a shift in the operating point. And so what caused the population variability, and then we selected by some goal process what was what improved the lot of the of these primitive societies. So that also goes with what's going on with Stallman's digital life as to why one population seemed to do better than others. Population variability and natural selection of those is a more important driver, and that shifted the operating point. What say you over this?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up is Sanjay.
Yes, thanks. So one of the central aspects of tonight's discussion for me was the concept of time. In the 4 exhibits that CJ shared, time was central to those 4. It was central to, for example, the Aboriginal concepts, the Pirahans, and in Genesis. And in the last diagram that he shared, I looked at it from, the perspective I took was as 4 different regions, concentric regions, and I started with a central region flowing outward. And time was one of the fundamental aspects that was constant, or not constant. It was inherent in each of those 4 regions, and it was required for each of those 4 regions. So when we have any kind of change, one of the ways that that people detect a change is by comparing something over time. And the same thing with process, right? So you compare a change, a process, you compare evolution over time, you compare design over time. So time is fundamental to all of these elements. So I wanted to focus just on that. That was central, I thought.
Thank you, Sanjay. Next up is Alexander.
What I would say, comment. Several centuries before, both evolution and genesis were spontaneous, more nature-based. But it looks like that now evolution and genesis are based on a human will. We have so powerful technology to change Earth, to make new rivers, lakes, dams, and so on. The same with DNA editing, and we can create new animals, new plants. And one more important thing is social evolution is also not spontaneous and nature-based, but it's mostly projected and executed and planned by people. It started from the French Revolution. It works now. As a change management, transformational technologies are pretty common in a world of big and small corporations. And it's not a big deal to make a radical transformation in a multinational corporation with hundreds of thousands of people, and just make it in 1 year. And also it's possible to make a change, a transformation for entire mankind. It's just necessary to create an adequate scale transformational event. And who knows, is it a COVID pandemic? It doesn't matter, is it natural or artificial? It is a really huge transformational event. And a lot of people, let's remember Charles Schwab, who made a book, Great Reset, use this event as a transformational event to make an artificial change of the entire mankind.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Next up is Sandy. Sandy, go ahead.
I really like the idea, CJ, of Stolderman and Nelson's idea that I know you're going to find this strange because I dislike so much of what's in that book, but what you quoted, though, is the best part of that book, that Genesis is the essence of design, and that ongoing Genesis is what design is about. But I see it in a new perspective tonight because of what you brought in with regard to the concept of time and storytelling Aborigines and from the Amazonians. The thing about it is that the story doesn't have to begin at the beginning. Beginning the story at the middle turns out to be a great way to see it. And I realize now that that's where design always begins. We never create something out of nothing. We always have a history of design. We have the results of previous efforts to design, and it's very appropriate that we begin in the middle. And in most cases, the middle is pretty much where we are right now. So the present, where so many other cultures are putting so much more attention than maybe we are driven to, is a really good place for us to learn from them, to appreciate that where we are is where we create from. Genesis begins here and now, and that's in the middle of the story. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandy. CJ, if anybody else wants to share anything or ask any questions, this is your last chance, and then we'll go to CJ. All right, CJ, go ahead.
Well, and Shrikant, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best idea I have seen, the method of thinking about change, is from John Boyd and the OODA loop. I'll put the, and we had, the associates of Boyd who worked with Boyd for, 20, 30 years to come and present on the idea. The idea is that of evolutionary epistemology, where you have your mental orientation or your ideas or concepts, and the world is changing all around you. So you are applying those ideas in order to decide and act, and then taking in things from the world in order to put everything back together. So you are continuously involved in the process of deductive destruction and creative induction, and you keep doing that, and that's life. So you are always in the middle of that process, and that's the only way to keep your ideas connected to the change. And change is and so it's that's a very foundational that's the most powerful idea that I personally find of thinking about change.
I just finished watching one of the videos on the OODA loop you put together, and it does seem to be a pretty nice framework, but I'm impressed that it's just a framework. It's not a formula.
Yes. Actually, I want to say that one of the things that John Boyd said is that if my book or anything I say is going to stop you from thinking, burn my books.
And we had tonight a lot of different participants with different thoughts. I presented the 5 exhibits. I don't think I can come up with a comprehensive comprehension, golden nugget. What I will say is I think there are 2 kind of aspects to change in the way we normally think about things. One is, the notion of a designer or an engineer who physically gets in and molds sheet metal or clay or turns a lathe or but we also, I would submit, we also design our conceptuality. Education is a way in which we engage other traditions to sort of change our thinking. And these exhibits are presented, curated to entice or suggest other ways to think about a subject such as change and evolution. Even a couch potato spectator can change the world by changing their perspective. And so in that sense, we all design the world. How we interpret what's going on. In one of our breakouts, we were talking about slavery. How you interpret slavery is going to affect how you think about the world. So the genesis that's ongoing is not just our physical worlds, which do change, and there is this interesting question about whether that technology creates change in humans or whether humans create the change in technology. Peter Paul Verbeek suggests it's kind of a vicious cycle where we change the technology and the technology changes us, and then we change the technology, and it's really complicated to understand. But conceptually, what we tune into and what we tune out of is a way in which we design our worlds. So I'll leave it at that. I wanted to share some thoughts on the curatorial approach to comprehensivity, which I tried to exemplify tonight. To foster our comprehensivity, we can organize a broad and extensive consideration of a topic, or we can organize a deep and intensive analysis. In addition, we could organize a synthesis, putting many ideas together into an overview, or a syntopical overview, kind of a broad survey that deeply compares and contrasts all the extant literature on a subject. Or perhaps we could organize an integrity, an attempt to fully integrate it all. These summary and survey approaches are excellent ways to support our comprehensivity. Tonight, however, I tried to exhibit a curatorial approach that takes a sampling of exemplars that suggests aspects of a topic and leaves it to you, the participant, to integrate it into a broader understanding of change and evolution. I hope this approach worked for you. I'd value any feedback in comments on the meetup or messaging or whatever. I want to quickly survey some of the benefits and shortcomings that I'm seeing from this curatorial approach. Some of the benefits, I think, includes that the curatorial approach invites the participant to interpret the exhibits to form their personal unique meaning. That is, it supports the active development of skills of synthesis and integration by the participants instead of merely demonstrating them in a summary. So I think the curatorial approach is a little more participatory, maybe. And because neither the participant nor the presenter is required to master the enormity of the whole of a subject and its literature, the curatorial approach may be less time-consuming and less difficult to organize. And I would another idea I had was that curation can critique ideas indirectly. Instead of in a summary, you might have to address them head on. And by doing it indirectly, it might have a greater impact because the exemplar may be more persuasive than either omitting something or dismissing something in a survey or a summary. And finally, I think the curatorial approach can sometimes gesture towards ineffable ideas ideas that cannot yet be expressed in terms of words, symbols, images, dance, or even music. Now, I want to say I also see some shortcomings in this curatorial approach. Maybe not everyone has the skills to turn a set of examples into a comprehensive comprehension. So a curation may fail to guide the participants to broader or deeper or more integrated considerations of the subject. A curation can foster confirmation bias if it presents too many exemplars that are already part of everyone's program, everyone's perspective, bailiwick. Effective curations may require an organizer to present some edgy exemplars, and that may prove so controversial that it distracts from the goal of fostering our comprehensivity. And the final shortcoming I'll highlight is that present-day discourse tends to favor grand summaries and broad surveys, especially ones that present the God's eye perspective, and better yet, a silver bullet that can allegedly explain everything and guide us to a new promised land. The less ostentatious and less overtly ambitious curatorial approach might not attract much interest given our contemporary bias for only considering boldly assertive claims that are profound and significant. So I'll leave you with a couple of questions. What topics could you curate to foster our comprehensivity at a future Comprehensivist Wednesdays session? Would any of you want to curate the full 3 Richard Lewinton, Stanislav Ulam memorial lectures that I highlighted in the essay for tonight's topic? Or go into more depth on one of the other subjects? This curatorial approach and my approach in general, I leave a whole bunch of things that maybe should be followed up with future curated sessions. Let us know. I'll be back on April 14th with a deeper dive into how to experience Genesis as ongoing, how we can contribute to the eternal now of creation that we're all contributing to. And if anyone has any brief thoughts, we can, it might still be early enough.
Yeah, let me do 2 things before we open it up again. I want to tell you about 2 meetups coming up. So next Wednesday, Sanjay is continuing his series on neuroscience. Sanjay, can you give a quick preview of what you're planning to do?
Sure. So next week we're going to talk about, really we're going to look at art. So art is the central thesis we'll use, but we're going to look at what happens inside our mind and brain. Primarily, we're going to start with perception. How do we perceive art? Not only through our visual senses, but all types of art. There are many types of art, and all of them use each of our 5 or so senses. We're going to look at why art is so challenging to define, why it generates such strong passions in us, why people interpret art as good and bad, why sometimes art is confusing to us. So there's many issues around that. Also, just in a general sense, we're going to look at what neuroscience findings help us to understand what occurs in our mind when we experience art. And lastly, we might learn, hopefully we learn something about creativity, how we can create good art or do new designs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sanjay. Really looking forward to it. Folks, and there is an entire playlist of Sanjay's videos on 52 living ideas on neuroscience. So check that out. Sanjay has been systematically building up core concepts of neuroscience. He's covering many areas. It's a tremendously expanding field right now. It's in a golden age. Every day new things are being discovered, and that's a great way of trying to grasp the range of the field. There were also a number of questions about tools. So I want to tell you about another meetup that is coming up. This gentleman, Merlin Donald, he's a neuroscientist and he studies cultures. And he has this book on origin of the modern mind. And we did an interview with him a couple of weeks ago on that. So I've posted that. And he's going to be back this Sunday at 5 o'clock. And the theme, his core theme is how different stages of human beings, he kind of divides the entire cultural evolution into multiple stages. Mimetic, where we are doing mostly imitative things to build our skills. Mythic, where we are using stories as an integrating mechanism. And theoretic, or ones that use external memory in order to scale up things. And the most intriguing thing that he's going to be talking about, probably for the first time, is what he thinks is going on now. How this kind of massive expansion of external memory and our connection, our ability to connect to it and use it, how is it changing the culture now? That's the topic on that. So if you're interested in tools and how we shape tools and how the tools shape us, what they make possible, that's what, he's the best thinker. He's one of the best thinkers I've found on that. So that's going to be Sunday at 5 o'clock. All right. So folks, we do have a little bit of time. So if you have any questions, let's keep them brief, questions and comments, so we can get more, any more comments that anybody has. If you have comments, just go ahead and type ! in chat. Alexander, briefly, please, go ahead.
In the chat, there is a really great question about how an evolution of language affected evolution of everything.
Sure. CJ, would you
for
like
example,
to take that?
A new speak of oral created stupid generations. Entire generation that was not as a simple language means simple thinking. Here are some positive changes, positive evolution.
Sure. CJ, would you like to take that? I have some things to say. Let me go ahead and say that, and then you can go ahead. We have talked, this is a topic that we have dealt with in detail in a series on Julian Jaynes. So if you look at Julian Jaynes' playlist, you've got about 10 videos by a gentleman called Brian McVeigh. And what we do is that we look at kind of the oral language, what writing does to language. We look at metaphors, how they develop language. So it's a very detailed look at kind of multi-angle look at language and what it does for us. This Saturday at 12 o'clock, we're going to be talking about Japan. And we're going to be talking about how the difference in languages, alphabetical writing versus pictographic writing, how do they work in the mind, and what consequences they have. So we're trying to cover many, many aspects of language in that. So that's what I would point you to. CJ, would you like to comment on language, role of language?
It's a big topic. It's very important. Like, some languages have words and concepts that aren't easy to express in other languages. So the Aboriginal, according to Stanner, the Aborigines had no word for time. Of course, they knew processes, and they had their song lines and a whole elaborate cultural apparatus to deal with how to find your way to where the food is, and so on. So language deeply affects the way we think of time and change and evolution, and I'm not getting anywhere else from that. I think we've got two issues on the table. Our main theme tonight is change and evolution. And then this sub-theme I added at the end there was thinking about curations as another way to explore our comprehensivity.
So I want to comment on that, the curation, but I'm going to give Brian the first time. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, and the curation point, yeah, I really liked it, and two strengths that I recognized as I was going through it. Number one, I mean, this is just an honest reaction. It's not intimidating. Sometimes when you have the expert presenting, it can feel intimidating. Like, how do you disagree? And the other one is that I thought for me it was very useful, because after you gave these exemplars, of course I had my own experience, my own constructs that I brought to it, which, let's just say they're valid, but they were broken down by all the other constructs that the other people were bringing, which were totally different from their own experience and perspective. And I found that very exhilarating and refreshing.
Excellent. So I want to second that. I mean, I think one of the things that we have here is that we have an ethos of joint exploration of the world, ourselves, and ideas. So what happens is that I think most people are free to put things on the table at whatever scale that they want, whether it be during the breakout rooms, if they want to speak more. I mean, and what happens is that that's actually a very powerful way of challenging your ideas and correcting your ideas in a very cheap way. Somebody else correcting your ideas instead of you living by them and finding out that you are wrong. This is a very effective way of getting the feedback. And what ends up happening is that if you actually listen to other people, that it's a very effective way of providing a feedback, getting feedback for this one. All right. Anybody else who has not spoken before, who would like to speak? And folks, we're always looking for people to present at this. I mean, one of the things that we do periodically, which I might do very soon, actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's see, in March, I think maybe the last one, I might do something where we have like lightning talks, which is exactly that, which is you just spend, take 5 minutes to talk about something that you're exploring, whether it's a book or something. That's an easy way to add, put your thoughts on the table. And I would encourage everybody to do this, because the more you talk, the more you get. Just like you get 10 times more by writing than just reading, you get 10 times more by actually formulating your thoughts and speaking out, and you will get feedback from other people. So I'll probably schedule one of those soon. All right. All right. So with that, let's see what time it is. It is about 10:46. CJ, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I don't have any right now.
All right. Wonderful. So it's always, I am always impressed with the range of things that CJ brings forth, and the effort that he puts in. I love the essays where you can get a very detailed preview. You can think about it yourself before the meetup, and then the entire format. And I like the combination of the deep knowledge and the deep humility with which with CJ does stuff. So CJ, it's always an honor and always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, good night, everybody. See you folks soon. Bye.